Hi, I'm Heinbach, and it's good to have you back. Welcome to the Patreon Q&A, where I answer questions that are sent to me by the good people that support what I do on Patreon. This is an exception to my normal videos because I'm doing this one live, so Patreons can give feedback during, and yeah, maybe the questions can be a bit more engaging. Since this is something new, I don't even know how many of you will turn up because the stream is exclusive to Patreons, but of course you can watch the voice, what's it called? The VOD, the VOD now. So without further ado, let's go to the questions. Here we go. Laura Saran. Hi, I was listening recently to Beatrice Ferreira's Echoes, released in 1978. I find this piece really moving. The mangled voices really hit me. I know this piece was heavily edited on tape, as most works from that area within the French school were. But how would you go about making similar music with vocals in a more live-oriented process? I'd love to know. Cheers. I'm going to put a link to that piece. Yeah, I'm going to put a link down in the comments. And after that, yeah, have a listen. And I think I've got the perfect tool for that. I made it myself. It's Gauss. With Gauss, you can realize all this pitch shifting and reversing of vocals very, very easily. So give that a try. It's an app. It's available on the App Store. I think it's €6.99 or $7.99. And it is definitely made for this live processing, live looping, kind of tape style editing. And especially if you run this in an AUM setup, OM or whatever you pronounce it, you can have many of these running. And that gives you live many possibilities to switch to different ways to manipulate the sound you put in. So I think Gauss Field Looper is the tool to use that for. Gayton, do you like physical spring reverb? Any interesting techniques you'd like to share? I love spring reverb. I love it a lot. I have one here in the dust collector. I have an echo mixer in the rack behind me there that is absolutely amazing. And I have a Space Echo that has a spring reverb in it. I've got the Field Kit effects that has in it. And it was one of the first modules that I got from a Urek, the Depfer A199. There is just something beautiful about having your signal go through a physical thing, these physical wires. And I love the process. Oh, of course, the Syntax also has one. I don't know how many I even have right now, but I really, really like them. So there's not many special techniques except for, of course, open them up and play them by blowing on them so you get these ghostly winds or with feathers or but be careful because they can break. And once the little spring gets detached, you basically have to buy a new one. I think it's really hard to reattach them. And what else do we have? And tips, I would say try reversing the order sometimes. For example, usually it's echo and then the reverb. That's lovely, but if you try it the other way, put a spring reverb and then the echo, you get extremely washed out sounds that are rather nice. Michael Konomos, if you haven't already covered this, can you tell us more about your music listening habits? How do you like to listen to music when you aren't making it yourself? I like to listen to music really when friends are there and putting on records and listening to them and talking about it. I like to listen to it on tour when I'm in the car, and I really like with friends listening to music is something that I really, really enjoy. And then also in the quiet moments when I'm just doing chores in the household, I put on music, be it on the radio, be it a tape, and or be it even a record. And then it just runs and just gets me into a space that I like. And yeah, it's very I don't listen to much music. That's a common thing because I make so much music. So not so much music listening. But if I do, it's always very pleasant. Jacob Stevens. Oh no, I think I downloaded too many sample packs. Yeah, there are a lot on my Patreon alone. Do you have any suggestions on how to select drum and percussion sounds that work well together? Does it work best to combine acoustic drums with acoustic tonal instruments, electronic drums with synthesizers? Is there an objective way to decide what hi-hat or kick or woodblock sound is best for a song? Oh, it's so many moving parts. And the difficult thing is everybody knows when the drums suck. Like the guitar tone can just be like a wire and that can be absolutely fine and people will enjoy that. But if the drums suck, everyone will be like, okay, this is not really working. So choosing drums is its own art and it's something that I personally don't really enjoy. I don't enjoy scrolling and scrolling and scrolling through all these, how you say, sample banks of endless sounds because I've got quite a few of them. So that's nothing. I try to just make my sounds and then I used to make a lot of different sounds and then I had kids that I would think they are cohesive and they were my own and I wouldn't go into the selector mode of choosing endless different drums. So I would say the more drums you make yourself, the more you will know when they work. And it's also nice to create these completely surreal kits. I mean, classic is like combining an electronic 808-ish bass drum with a natural uh, snare that can work beautifully. So just mix and match whatever you like and think about where it fits with the rest of the track or song. There is no rule really. Just make it sound fit together and have joy in the process. That's not get yeah. Don't be like supermarket. Which cereal box am I gonna choose? Yeah. Simon Tere. You mentioned Pansonic briefly in Why We Bleep. How familiar are you with Mika Vainio's music? I hope I pronounced Vainio. Vainio probably. Ah, your music bears similarities with his, especially your heavier sounds with test equipment. Would love to hear your thoughts about the late great Mika if you know about his music. Kitos. I know about his music. I'm not like with what track and all the with especially which pieces. I was a huge Pansonic fan, and I loved watching them. I watched them live for one time, and that was absolutely amazing because it was this big music festival where there were people with accordions and choirs. It was, I think, Nordic countries and Germany combined concert. And then Pansonic came on, and they emptied the space except for like 20 or 30 heads who really loved the music. And I was blown away by the rarity and purity of the music. And that's something, yeah, that's in Mika's work to the end, I think. And I really attached to that because it's so uncompromising and pure. And that's something that mental state where something this pure is possible is something that I oftentimes strive to be in. So that's kind of how they influenced, or he influenced me, as purity and sense of purpose that is to the music. Matthew Chisholm. Hi Heinbach, greetings from the desert. So this past year you've managed to help breathe new life into some, shall we say, dead technologies to give us some wonderful new software tools and plugins. Thank you. The dead in me wants to call you a technomancer for bringing the dead back to life. This is sort of how the sausage gets made question. I'm very interested in the process you went through to make Wires, Gauss, Fundamental, et al. Can you comment on the method you went through to digitally profile the equipment you helped resurrect, the Rode and Schwarz oscillator, the Soviet wire recorder test equipment? Do you hope to do this again? Thanks for keeping us inspired, Matt in Nevada. Thank you. It's different from project to project. For example, for Fundamental, I deep sampled all the sounds from that Rode and Schwarz, and then I gave them to Sonic Lab to process them. And what he did was he used machine learning to put all these sound together and create a representation and create wavetable oscillators that would play these. So it's not just static samples, it's more like 5 oscillators per voice happening at the same time and overlapping. It was a very wild process what Zenon did with this, and I was amazed by the sound that came out of it. And at some point you come to the limits. So at some points, especially in the high frequencies, the aliasing just becomes too wild, even with the sine, though that Rot and Schwarz isn't really a sine. So we had to tune a point where a mathematical sign would be put in. And that was absolutely fine because the higher signs were very pure in the end. So there's a crossover point that you don't notice, I think, where the mathematical representation and not a wavetable version comes in. And that's the only way we could make this without, it basically being an alias overload. And with wires, that was, for example, that was similar. There was a lot of testing and poking done, like all the impulses, everything, of everything, many times, and different settings, going through that. And then it was thinking about, okay, how does this happen? How is this done? And then came all in the like different magic sauce of to make it exactly how it sounds, but make it a more true representation than pure impulse response would have done. So there's a lot going on under the hood that makes this so alive, which when you just work with impulse responses, which are incredibly hard in the super noisy machine to get anyway, you wouldn't get. So that was part of the magic. And Carl and me spent weeks fine-tuning it and sending it back and forth, and this is how it works, this is how it can work. So that was a process. And yes, I will be doing more, definitely. So maybe even this year, but we'll see. Time is always a thing. Starved. Advice on vocal experimentation, or how do you suggest tackling voice modulation in unique ways with analog equipment? Yeah, one of the nicest things I like to treat voice with is the Princeton Applied Research CR4A, and that's the opening of the video that I made on this unit. There you can see me going, and then it just crackles it up. I really enjoy the sound of that. It's a very special unit, so hard to find, but I also like using ring modulators and lock-in amplifiers to process voice. Vocoder, of course. Vocoder is always, it's amazing. It always brings joy to me, even though I still have yet to do a track where I use the vocoder for vocals, actually, because I use it mainly as a filter bank that can be pitched. So, yeah. And oftentimes I feel for processing digital stuff, I mentioned before, Gauss is wonderful for this, because there you can do a lot and you can do many things. But then there's all these things that you can do with weird microphones, or putting a piezo up here and singing through that here, picking the sound up from here, and singing into different things, putting microphones at the end of like tubes or bottles, and just shaping the acoustic space between the voice and the microphone. That can result in absolutely fantastic results. Joshua A.C. Newman. Hey Heinbach, I'm packing up parts of my studio for the first time in a year, so I can go visit my also vaccinated family and build synthesizers with my cousin. I took the opportunity to listen to this video as I was organizing my gear for travel. It was great having you hang out with me in my studio. It was great having you hang out with me in my studio and talk about the art process while I pack up scopes and containers of components and cables and tape decks and modules. That's not a question. I think you replied to a different video and it ended up in this thread. Okay, but yeah, so I'll take this and thank you very much. And I hope you had a lovely holiday and built some cool synthesizers. Ken Shestock. Any advice on how much time to give a certain instrument, module, etc. before moving on or adding to the mix of other gear? Maybe this is a loaded question. Let us say for someone who only has at most maybe 2 hours a day to get into that instrument, but really not that much more time, kids, work, life, etc. Hypothetically, do you get it, but don't dig deep enough. You get it, but don't dig deep enough and feel that gas urge to get the next new shiny thing. Should I stop and hunker down, dig in and resist the urge, even though there is a sale or finally found one on Reverb, eBay, etc., and just try to get as much possible out of that instrument before I move on? You seem to get a pretty fair amount of new gear to try and get grips on. However, you have a different situation where you can give gear more dedicated time. In average Joe terms, do you have a good rough gauge of how to know when it's okay to expand? Late 90s, little no money college era me thinks he knows the answer, but 2021 me is like, look at all this shiny new thing. It's in stock, take my money. I have nothing against the impulse to buy gear. Like, if it makes you happy, it makes you happy. But if in the end you got it and then it's just another thing where you feel guilty of having it, I mean, I buy and get a lot of stuff, and I'm always only happy in the moment when I've put it in in a space where it can live. As soon as it's just like lying around and just test it maybe once, but if I can find a purpose for it in the studio, then I'm happy. And there's gear that I have that I immediately know I want this to be part of my studio. I need this as part of my sound. And then there's gear that's like, okay, I need this for certain projects. That's good. And then there's gear that, honestly, most of the gear that I move on is because I don't get on well with the UI, or it's too complicated for me. If something is too complicated and takes too much time, I just lose interest very quickly. It's the same situation basically from a different side. Too much gear and not enough time to like go really deep into really deep manuals and stuff like that. So there's boxes, modern boxes. I mean, Octatrack is famous for that, or all the Electron gear that is, especially the classic units. They are very complicated, and you need to hunker down and to get into that workflow, and then it's absolutely wonderful. But you need to do that, and I couldn't. I tried it, and I couldn't get it, but I got along very well with other tools from them. The simpler Digitakt and Digitone, I really got on with those fast. But basically, there are some things that if I take too long to figure them out, because there's too much going on, usually it's too complex. If there's like, especially sequences that can do so many things that it becomes for me unintuitive to be like, I need something simple. And I love connecting simple things to make a complex thing, because then I can see with the cables how everything is connected, and then I can just have to figure out fun ways to move through time with that. So I would say I prefer, for example, the Korg SQ1 to more full-featured sequencers, because it's just simple and easy and fun. So yeah, I think if you have little time, pick gear that is simple, that does one, maybe two things, and then see how you can fit it in your setup. And if you don't feel it, move on and sell it. And that's absolutely a healthy way, I think, to go about this. There are some things where I have to say, and this is when I was really like, I mean, there was for the longest time, as a professional musician, I only bought like one huge thing. So sometimes it had to be like a new MacBook, or it had to be, that was my big purchase for the year. Or then I bought the Coco Quantos, which was my big purchase for that year. And I got really deep into it and I loved it. But that gave me from the get-go something, and then I had to learn how to play it. So that was very rewarding. So if a piece of gear has that immediate, okay, there I give you something, and is rewarding when you put more into it, then I love it. So yeah. That was a very long answer. I hope you could get something out of that. Simon Terre. Oh, Since there's not a lot of questions in, I would like to ask another one, if you don't mind. Self-oscillating filters like the Schwayman filters seem to play a big part in your music, or at least in your Eurorack stuff. What do you think is so special about filter-generated sine waves? They do sound gorgeous, but how do they differ from sines generated by oscillation or by oscillators? Thank you. For me, they just sound more glassy, and they've got a purity that is more there, but maybe it's also because, and that might just be, no, it might just be me that thinks that, because resonance is a very chaotic thing. You're basically dancing on the edge of chaos, and any moment, like, it could break into enormous feedback, and to find just the right spot where it resonates, it's just a thing of beauty, because I feel there's always chaos and noise under the purity. So that's maybe a reason why I like them. Plus, of course, I like to ping them. And that's a very natural envelope. This envelope is so beautiful. How it decays, it's one of the most acoustic things in electronic music. And that's something that I love. It feels hyper-real. MF, I really love the song you created in this video. Okay, I have to listen to that around 12:40. Which one could it be? Yep. Hope I'm not getting rickrolled. Ah. I'm going to put the link to that in the comments. So, what was the question? I wonder how you would build a live set based on this wonderful setup. For example, a 30-minute set with a diversity of sounds, contrast, and possibly a constant flow of different emotions. Your reply would be very appreciated. I would sample a lot on the tape and use a tape player to bounce ideas off that. Because I use all the oscillators, and in that patch, I use a lot of the stuff that is there. And to go to another spot would require a lot of changing. And right now, I'm not versed enough in my modular, because that would require constant practice, and it would require me to, basically sit down every day with it and learn to play a patch and go through it. So, similar, just practically, I would have a reel-to-reel or a nice cassette recorder, and I would record parts on there, and then play it into the modular to process again and play on top of it. So this way I always have like new chapters. So I get like, for a 30-minute set, I would get like maybe 5 chapters, 6 chapters. And the cassettes would help in that, because they are like big changes suddenly. You can also do that, of course, with something that loops digitally, but for me, I just love the aesthetic of tape loops. So that would be how I would approach that. Else, it's difficult to do something with a set of this size, but you can. You just need to practice a lot. And I was at some point also good with my small modular and used that live and played that live with just, I think, an OP1 and an Echo. But then I went Seat Lombard, because that is just more playable live for me. Jesse Blaney. Am I submitting too late again? No. This is a long time, because it was the summer holidays. In your last Q&A, you mentioned you trained yourself to finish and work on songs quickly. I would like to know how you achieved that and what steps in that process you may have found harder than others. It's working on a deadline. Working on theater always means like, okay, we need to have this song in the evening at the rehearsal. And then I'm sitting there, okay, I need to write this song, and then I have to stay there and then I have to sing there the song that I only sung in my head on the train while I was going there, and play it and be like, okay, and I have to wow everybody enough so that they say, I want to sing this. It's a lot of pressure. Pressure helps. So, and the hardest thing was overcoming like these thresholds of like, now I'm standing here with something I just did. I have no idea if it's good, but let's just try it, and losing that fear and becoming confident in, this is something good, and sorting out the stuff that's more superfluous from the stuff that's actually good, that has a good core. And that's one of the biggest things. Just focusing on the core of a thing, on the bare bones, and then moving on from that. Teeter, how can I be less judgmental while working on a project and keep making a progress? Ah, that's related. You have to put on like, if you I do this mentally, but I put on different roles. So I put on a different head figuratively when I'm making a track. And I say, I'm making, I'm playing, and I'm an open mindset. I play and I experiment, and that is what brings me joy. And I don't try to think of like the stuff that comes after. I don't try to think of which label is gonna release that. Where am I gonna put this out? Is this as good as the other things? Da 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 da. All that stuff. No, no, no. I try to just make it fast, beautiful, make the experiment, and then the next day I sit down with the lab code and say, okay, this is interesting, maybe it's good, maybe not. But then I contrast it with other tracks and see where it fits and try to put it into a context that I think could be interesting. But that is basically the main thing. I think you have to have go into the space with different mindset and have different roles for yourself. And it really helps to, for example, for me, I got a new Mac here, so it's nice to have like a big screen now. But one important thing is I can now do all my office. Like I can take the other laptop. It was basically it's strange. It's a laptop, but I have it in here, so it kind of belongs here, and I don't want to take it away. So I have to go. I always took it to it felt hard to take it out of the space, is what I'm meaning. But I had to take it out of the space to do office work, because I can't do office work in my studio. It kills me. It kills the mood of the space. So I need to move to the office work, which is very important, somewhere else, outside. And that helps. So that's another step, to find yourself different spaces where you can do things and to play different roles in what you do. Because once they all intermingle, all the thoughts keep chasing each other. And that's a bad thing to be with. And it's not easy. I've struggled with that. But with practice, it works. Trey Milner, what advice would you give to a musician looking to get on a label, smaller local labels or bigger labels? And as an artist, what should you expect from your label? I mean, a label is first and foremost something that connects you to other people and has maybe some promotional power and has already a fan base. So look at what the label offers you in regards to that. Or does it lift you up? Being on that label, does it bring your music to a new spot? Does it lift you up? That's, I think, one of the main things. So the other thing, expect from a label, just give your music more reach. I think that's the best thing. If a label helps your music get seen in different places where you yourself can't go, I think that's a really, really good thing. And another thing, sometimes it's just also a very friendly relationship, like for my latest album here. So Home Stories, is it my fourth or my fifth record on Psy Records? I think it's my fourth. We've become friends, and I like to bounce ideas of him and send him stuff. Here, what do you think of this song? What do you think of this track? And we talk. And that's, to have someone to talk to about your music and give you feedback, honest feedback. That's something that's, how you say, unbezahlbar. You can't pay for that, really. Joe Crispin, are there any scales, modes, chords, phrases, etc. that you find you particularly drawn to when composing, whether intentionally or not? I think it's G minor. I always like to go to G minor, even though I never in the I never use it in the end. And then I love all the black keys. I really do. And I sometimes make the mistake. I one time make the mistake of scoring for a violin all in the black keys, which makes it sound a bit less open. But I like the sound. So I like a lot of the dark keys. And there's probably a lot of things that I just do, but I tend to not notice because I tend to try to keep that. I always try to distract myself to not go into motor memory, muscle memory, and all that stuff, and the rehearsed patterns. That's why I had an incredibly inspiring moment when the Kruma DS2 that you see, yeah, there behind me, when that arrived and it's kind of broken. It played different keys on the poly section and on the mono section. So that was that was that was so inspiring because I couldn't trust anything that I'd learned. I would have to listen and my fingers would move differently. Ah. Hi, Analog Weapon. Nice to see you here. Finding a use for something is more fun than obtaining it. Yes, that's absolutely true. I think that was in response to the earlier comment, and I think that's absolutely true. Once you find something once you can make the thing that you bought fit, it's so satisfying. And what helps even is like a shelf, and I put stuff in the shelf, and these used to be just for storage, but now they're part of an instrument. They're part of the islands that I built. And I just finished one of those, or reworked one of those, 2 days ago. 2 days ago. And it makes me so, so happy. Good. Andrew Bowring. Any chance of you working with Anja Plaschk, Soap and Skin, or even Laurie Anderson? I was thinking that the combination of abstract experimental music with lyrics could be very interesting. I do too, but I have no contact. But I'm always open for all kinds of collaborations in this regard. And yeah, who knows what's gonna come, but I've got no contact. So yeah, would be lovely. Robinson's Village. Bit of a broad one. Are there any more tips and tricks for the Quadraverb? I have one in the post at the moment and love your precious Octaverb video on it. I tried it out at a friend's and the results were so good. Yeah, they are. You know what? I don't have any other trick. I think that's the trick that's become so part of my sound that I'm not changing it. I'm not doing anything to it. I just keep it like that. I heard there are GT versions of the Quadraverb that have a resonator in it that is supposed to be amazing. So you could check those out. But I just love the verb into the verb. Oh, excuse me. Let me close the door. Else there comes noise in. So. Scott Boone. I've never owned a tape recorder and want to get one to play with for recording effects. I wonder if you could give some generic advice about what to look for in vintage used tape recorders for recording effects. I love your videos on tape machines, but the Heinbach effect almost immediately kicks in and they become unobtainium. Why would I want 4 tracks over 2? How many heads do I need to look for to set up a tape echo delay situation? Are there practical differences between reel-to-reel and cassette? What else am I not thinking of? Thanks. I think I made a primer video on working with tape, and there's a lot of these questions covered. Basically, you want a 3-head recorder because then you can make easily tape echoes out of it. And then the consumer recorders are usually all with 4 tracks, so more longer playing time. So you can flip it, and then you've got more playing time. That will result in a thinner sound, but that can be fine. Like for mid-range synthesizers, pads and all that, that can be absolutely great, especially once you pitch them down, because you don't get as much like super flabby, wobbly bass. So I've got 2 recorders that I recommend that are cheap. I just bought, how many of them? 3 for a project, and that's the Sony TC366 and 377. 377 just has some cosmetic and functional updates that are really nice, but the 366 just works fine. So these are machines that are reliable, super sturdy, and they sound good. they sound really good. So, of course, they are not a Nagra, but for experiments, absolutely lovely machines, and they look great. Cool. I think that's it already for the Q&A. So, thank you for watching and staying with me to the end. If you want to support what I do, there's the Patreon, and you can ask questions there. There's a thread that almost monthly, except for some times like this where there's a big break. But yeah, there's a thread, and you can ask your questions there. And yeah, just sign up over on patreon.com/Heinbach. And thanks to all the Patreons. You are the people that make all of this happen. And one thing that I should have done, I can't find a way to add a banner with all your names. I'll figure it out. Thank you all. Bye bye, and bye, Analog Weapon.